Andrew Anderson, and I'm going to talk a little bit while Bill gets my PowerPoint set up, but I really love what I do. About 6 years ago, I had this startling experience at a dollar store where I came across a couple patients that I had no idea who they were, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, I don't know my patients anymore. I got to stop working for the man. And so that day, I learned about direct primary care. It was the first time I ever heard those words in that order. And at a blistering pace, 93 days later, I opened up my practice. And it was so fast, as a matter of fact, that my very first patient, we're standing in a dimly lit exam room, and we're standing there because they hadn't turned on the electricity yet. We hadn't had any furniture delivered yet. And I remember saying to my first patient, Gary, don't touch the wall because the paint is literally still wet. And so that's how it started. And then at that time, I burned 3 things. And so the first one, because I opened it, didn't plan for it. My wife is a saint, and first we burned through our savings. It wasn't really expected. This is what I wanted to do. She kind of recognized that fire in me and was willing to put all her chips on that, and I'm grateful for that. And then the second thing is I burned a lot of bridges. I worked in the largest doctor's office, regardless of specialty, in our little town in Virginia. And I was on track to be the next president. I was the first one to break the 950 RVU per month mark, which if you have been made to count RVUs, that's a stupid amount. And it's not really what I wanted to do. That's well over double what the national average is. And I was just working so hard, and I hated it. And so when I said, yes, I was going to be the next president, but actually I'm going to exit left stage, that wasn't taken very well. And then I find myself in DPC, making it up as I go, as I think many of us have, and even the success stories that were told yesterday, same thing. And so I find myself saying yes when I shouldn't say yes. Sometimes I'm not allowed to answer the door when people sell magazines door to door and stuff, because I'll say yes and I'll buy things that we don't need. And so my wife is the hatchet man with that stuff. And so that's kind of what happened. In walked to our office. We'd been open for 30 days. This slick saleswoman, and she's like, hey, how about you buy our magazine and whatever, and you can put ads in there. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, okay, yeah, this is how you do it. And I had no idea what I was doing. She was like, also, this is a home magazine, so we're doing a home show. Do you want our last booth? She probably told that to the next 50 people, that it was the last booth. And I'm like, sure, I don't know what a home show is. And so next thing you know, I find myself at the mall in a corner, and it's like old dude o'clock at the mall. And so, like, you know, all the mall walkers have come through, they've left, the families and teenagers haven't come yet, and you have those like old dudes that walk around with their hand behind their back, you know, like just walking to walk. And so this guy stops in front of my booth, and I literally have a guy selling windows on my left, a guy selling gutters on my right, and here I am, a doctor. I've been open for 60 days, and this guy was nice enough to think out loud, and he says, why would I see a doctor that has to come to a home show to find patients? I am asking myself the same question, you know. And so I was like, what am I doing? And at that point, with my 7-month pregnant wife sitting behind me, very kindly waving to people and stuff, and Mr. Think Out Loud at Old Dude O'Clock in front of me, that's when I realized I had already burned the third thing, and that is the life rafts. And I realized that there was no plan B, and that I, you know, better make this ship float. And so for the next few minutes, I kind of want to talk about how I did that. So let's see, we've got a clicker. So Nicole, I'm like fanboying over here, like when she's talking, because she is like a powerhouse. And I listened to her talk last year at the DPC Summit, and like to be speaking next to her is super cool. So I'm talking about growth, and I'm not talking about marketing, which is different. I mean, marketing reminds me of when I take my kids camping. I'm like, okay, we're gonna learn how to make a fire. It's fun, it's a skill or whatever, and they just want to dump leaves in the fire. And I'm like, no, I'm an Eagle Scout. That is not how you start a fire. And it gets real bright, and then it burns down. And I feel like sometimes if you're doing the wrong kind of marketing, that's what happens. You get this like leaves in the fire effect, and it's not growth. Because you're always having to feed that fire something that's going to burn out quickly, and you're not building momentum. I want momentum for my practice, and I definitely want it for yours. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Nicole has taken a different approach than most of us, and so she dumps a lot of money into her marketing. And I do now too, but in the beginning, it was very much a DIY thing, because the first thing I burned was our shavings. And so I just went out and like figuratively knocked doors. Well, not completely figuratively. And so everybody's like, hey, do social media, Doc. And I'm like, okay. And so I'll do social media. And here I haven't learned my lesson from the home show yet. And so I get the camera set up. I've got the ring light on. And I'm like, okay, TikTok is how we save lives now. And so I turn it on, and the music goes like, dun, dun, dun. I'm like, what? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm like, turn off the camera. We're not doing this anymore. And so 9.2%, I made a point of that point. That is the number of conversions on a typical social media ad. That's the number of people that'll buy based on an ad on the socials. And here is a much better stat for the number of people that will take and buy based on a recommendation from a friend. And so what I wanted to talk about, we all know, we're like, word of mouth is the best. Word of mouth is the best. We all know that, but how do you facilitate that? And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit. In short, if you had to sum up my whole talk in one sentence, it would be this, like, how do you facilitate word of mouth? There's lots of ways. And I really enjoyed how Nicole was like, this is slightly off from the typical opinion of the greater DPC world. I've got a few of those. I think controversy makes great conversation after the presentation. So first things first, I had to quote Socrates here, it's true. And then I had this like epiphany as Heather and I were talking last night, just putting it real succinctly, that you need to have some like introspection before you can have expansion. And then you need to know what you can bring to the table and what you can naturally, organically, easily bring to the table. I mean, we read about all these cool things. And again, I'm like awful at buying things that I don't need, just like mentally. Not necessarily throwing out money, but I read these people online on the DPC Docs Facebook group, and they're like, you need to make videos, and you need to do this, and all that stuff. And I try it, and I'm like, I'm not good at this. But what I'm good at is, talking to people, meeting the neighbors, knocking on their door, things like that. So you really need to take a look at yourself and see what you're good at. And it doesn't have to be medical stuff. Of course, I recommend you being a good doctor. But I was talking to a doc yesterday, and he plays pickleball. And he was like, I do pickleball, and who is out in the middle of the day playing pickleball? People who like to talk and people who are business owners and things like that. And so, know your strengths, like really know your strengths and capitalize on that. It can be medical, it can be business, it can be just like your personality, but capitalize on that. And then also you need to know your weaknesses. That's a harder one to put a magnifying glass on, but the sooner you know those, the better. I spent way too long trying to make this Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams, but in this middle is the sweetest spot. So at the top you can see, what can you be the best at? And that's what you've figured out after your moment of introspection. And I really, really strongly recommend you figure this out. And then in the green, you'll see, what do you actually enjoy doing? When that whole phrase, maybe overused phrase is, if you do what you love, you'll never work in a day of your life. Dang it, that would be awesome. And I think we're all getting closer and closer to that with what we're doing right here. And then finally, What can you make money at? That is important. But if you can get all those to mix and you have them all intersect in that very middle spot, like your practice will take off guaranteed. But you do have to take a moment and figure that out. I think in some ways this is more important than the business plan. Dr. Paul Thomas yesterday, he's a good friend of mine, he was talking about his business plan that he made. He put $90 in the bank and all this stuff, and like, he is more organized than I am. This was money in the bank for me. Once I realized this, that momentum came very organically. This sounds dumb, but it is true. Once you've figured out what you are good at naturally, you need to lean into that a little bit, and then you need to lean in even harder into the things that you're not so good at. And it has a lot to do with knowing your numbers, like walking around the waiting room, so to speak. What is the A to Z experience of each of your patients? Because I am shocked. So I talk to a lot of docs all throughout the country to help them build their practice. And I am shocked by how many of them just have no clue the experience that their patients have before they're in the exam room sitting in front of them. You have to know this. And you need to know that they're not picking up the phone until 6 rings and then they're having to wait for X amount of minutes. You need to know that X amount of minutes. Is it 20 minutes? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 17 minutes? You need to figure that out. And then you need to look and improve by, 1%, these bite-sized improvements every once in a while, so kind of what's happening. But really, just look at being the best. Look at what people hate. Look at what they're doing. Look at every single aspect of the exposure of your patients to your office and make it better. And then once you know that and you've earned a good reputation, ask for 5-star reviews. There's lots of studies that show, we're all shy about this. There's a lot of studies that show, if you ask, like, they are more committed to you. If you do a service for somebody, you take a survey after the fact, you like them better. My whole family's into psychology. We talk about the DSM-5 changes at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And this is a thing. Do not be afraid to ask. Something that we've started doing, which has helped, is we will put in the chart somewhere discreetly, like, they rated us. So you're not asking the same person over and over like my dentist keeps doing. And here's another hot take on things. This has even been asked in the last session, I think. I think it was the breakout. Some gentleman asked. But we don't want to overextend ourselves. And we are so afraid of that. And my lesser popular opinion is do what you, let me read it, I'm going to mess it up. Do for one patient what you wish you could do for all patients. I mean, really, really baby them. And here it is. You're thinking like, oh my gosh, well, I'm not going to take calls at 11 o'clock. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you do with this what you do with every finite resource in your life. Let's look at money. You budget. You know exactly how much you have to spend on this, that, and the other. Do the same thing. Budget. You have X amount of patients a day. Budget a couple free slots in your day to do whatever it is. If it's to text everybody whose birthday it is that day, great. If it's to follow up on the people who had surgery over the last week, great. Do things like that so they feel the love. Because what's going to happen is you will start to grow this invaluable resource, trust. And all businesses grow at the speed of trust. And if you can do that, then you will succeed. Let's see, advocates. This has been something that I didn't realize I was doing until after the fact. So I'll save you the trouble. Medical students or nursing students or whatever. Medical students is what we have. We have a med school in our town. And they fell in love, because they're getting told by all these disgruntled surgeons that, like, don't go into medicine. I told my kids to run far away and all this, and they fall in love with what you have, and then they go out and they see the patients, and they've got like 30 minutes to examine a patient, and they're just shooting the breeze, and they're like, well, do you have a family doc? No, I don't. Do you know any? Yes, I know Dr. Anderson, and his office kicks butt. And so they go out like these little disciples and just share the good word, and it is awesome. Because what also happens is the patients are all teed up with these great warm, fuzzy feelings about your practice before they even call. Know your audience. Okay, so there's a lot with this one, and I will trim it down for us. Let's see. So this goes beyond the obvious of, like I'm a pediatrician, so I'm going to see kids, or I'm going to reach out to new parents, or I'm a geriatrician, so I'm going to run stuff in the printed newspaper. Just like know who your consumers are. It's sick people. So you might have several touch points before they actually reach out to you because, healthy people aren't looking for a doc. Sick people are. Keep that in mind when you schedule your first appointment. We're like, I'm sick now, and you're like, well, I can see you in 6 weeks. I know a few docs do that so they don't get like this person that comes, they get taken care of, and then they're like, oops, I'm canceling. I have not had that experience. I was preached that very hard. In the beginning, I was like, it just doesn't feel right. And so I was like, you're sick today? Let me see you tomorrow. And they're like, ooh, that's great. And we've even done it that same afternoon. You got to tread lightly with those. The other thing is, and this is, once I learned this stat, things change for me. 80% of all decisions made on where to consume healthcare is made by a woman. That made a huge difference for me. When I started doing Facebook ads and stuff like that, instead of like the greater population of Lynchburg, Virginia, I was like, all women between the age of 22 and 65. And it instantly helped all my metrics. Guys don't care. This one, I think they've used this term a couple of times in this conference, but funnels, think of people who don't have PCPs. For us, I'm a DO. I do a lot of DO kind of manipulation stuff. So I reached out to physical therapists, and they were easy to get in touch with. The surgeons were like, I don't have time for you. And I was like, well, I don't have time for you. And so I reached out to the PTs, and they're like, free lunch, sweet. And so, because somebody gets hurt, they go to the ortho, they say knee-jerk to PT for 6 weeks, and then the PT talks to them for 30 minutes while they're doing their leg, whatever, and they say, do you have a PCP? No, I don't, and that conversation ensues. Psychologists, urgent care, endo, allergists, and then there's the non-medical, like realtors are great. They love to know and be in the know. And so talk to them. I ended up cold calling every single realty office in our town. It was a rainy few days, and COVID had just happened, and I was bored, so that's what I did. And I got patients, and then they got patients for me. Let's see, gyms are actually also a good one. This is a clever phrase that Dave Ramsey uses. And so, if there's something that you like a medical type of hobby you have, go for that. Like if you're like rheumatoid arthritis, that's my jam. Go to those Facebook groups, talk about it on your Facebook group, your website, go to there's events. It's much easier to circulate the news of you within those smaller spheres than it is to just blindly cast a broad net. And then I talked about this a little bit, but here's my life hack. Here, people hate the healthcare system pretty much globally. And so what I started doing is I geofenced all my Facebook ads. Like it said, how long have you been waiting? And it would go straight to the fee-for-service insurance doctor's offices in town. So when they're waiting the obligatory 40 minutes to get into the doctor, they're sitting there scrolling the face place, and then it comes up, Kaya Health, how long have you been waiting? We don't even have a waiting room. Click. My website traffic went up by 330% the first day I did that. And it stayed at that for weeks until I was like, oh, I'm still under my non-compete. Maybe I should take this down. Asked a lawyer. It turns out it's totally kosher. Micro networking. You can go to these big networking events, but everybody's selling things, nobody's buying anything. Micro networking, how we've done it is you call a surgeon, you call another specialist to be like, hey, I love what you do. Dr. A, B, and C has said good things about you. How about we go to lunch? Everybody eats. It works really well. You can be really strategic about this, or a little bit more just like, hey, let's meet up and eat. And also, we write a thank you letter every month to a specialist in town. It's a genuine thank you letter. We do it. Every physician and provider in our office does it, and it's been so good for building like really good relationships within our community, and it's grown the practice. When you move into an area, get to know your neighbors. Don't do like the whole salesy, hey, we just moved in, we're a doctor's office, this is what we do, you know. Talk about me. Talk about them. Know their dogs' names, you know, see how their business is doing. Don't say a darn thing about your office. They'll ask about it, then you can answer it. But then, like, they know that you care about them, and they will talk to people. This is another hot take on things. If some people will be like, hey, I want to do a special. If you sign up now, decrease price, things like that. In short, I think that pulls the attention towards money and away from value. I recommend people don't do it. Do anything you can to get people in the door. This is another uncommon opinion for some. And it's, you can do some fee-for-service type things. Like pediatrician, it works great for them to do like one-off urgent care type of visits. Conversion rate is real high. For us family docs, I found that doesn't work quite as well. You can do lots of things. Some of it is like auxiliary type things. Like I'm a DO, I do a lot of sports medicine. We had a massage therapist come in. She pulled people from her panel that she had before. She came to us, and then just people from off the street, and they came to us. They came in the door, and they're like, oh my gosh, this place is so much better than my doctor's office. But you can get creative. You can do like pre-travel physicals. You can do sports physicals. You can do, we did the massage therapist, but you can do flu shots. You can do all kinds of things. And then there's things for free. Everybody loves free. So we live in a area where there's a big Baptist school, and so they do a lot of like mission trips, and so sometimes they have to get physicals before they go to Honduras or Guatemala or whatever, and so I do those for free. And then they're like, this is so nice of you, Dr. Anderson, and I do it, to be nice. And then I realized, like, holy cow, they all ask me, like, how much does this cost? Is there anything I can do? And I'm like, it would be awesome if you just rated us online. And they're like, oh, cool. And they do it right there. And we've got a QR code right there on the wall. So I'm like, click that pic and leave that 5-star review. And they do, and it helps. So now we're the highest rated family medicine office in the state of Virginia. Deals with small businesses, like something we just emailed our patients. We went to all the health food stores where people get supplements and the things, and we're like, hey, how about you cut our people a deal, and we'll send them an email and say, go there. And so one was like 10%. And then so we went to the other one, we're like, hey, do this. And is anybody else doing it? Yes, this other place is doing 10%. And I was like, well, I'll do 15%. I was like, I like this, the way this is going. And then the other one was like, no, we're not going to do it. And we're like, fine, okay. And then we went back 6 months later, and we're like, hey, you're the only one that's not doing it. Really? Boom. So we've got all 3 of them in our little town. We emailed that to patients, and they just go in and they say, yeah, we're members of Kaya Health, and they're like, cool, 15% off. And we do the same thing with gyms. We do the same thing. We're trying to make a list, and so people come to us, and we'll email them every so often and say, hey, when you're a member with us, you get this and this and this and this and this and this discount. Not only do you get the best healthcare in town, but you get a lot of other cool stuff. In short, I think we get caught up in like trying to sell things. I'm awful at selling things. I don't know if you know this, but Christian Bale was in a musical in the 90s. And he talks about selling newspapers in like the 1910s or something. And his whole point, he makes this quote that like, headlines don't sell papers. Newsies, that's what he was, sells papers. And so that's, your story is what is important. You are your practice. You are the message. You don't need to do the, like, in my opinion, a little, like, oversaid, like, all the access and discounted labs. That's my message. That's not your message. You are a doc that cares so much that you mortgaged all this opportunity, your life savings, all the security for you and your family just so you could take better care of people. That's a powerful message. Lean into that message and say it over and over and over, because people will never hear it enough. Thanks, guys.
Have you received any bad Google reviews, and did you reach out and ask them to take it down or amend the review?
So the bad review, we did get a bad review, and I was in a bad mood that night. And it, like these loose cannons. And I'll tell you, one of the best things that we did is develop something we call an oops card. And so we went and bought a large amount of $5 gift cards at Starbucks. And so whenever there's like a bump in the road, we just knee-jerk and send one of those out. If we're like asking ourselves the question, should we send one out? We send it out. And that has decreased a lot of friction. I mean, just last week, I think we had to send out 2. And so like a lady came in, she's like, yeah, I had a 2 o'clock appointment, and I'm a brand new patient. We're like, this is gonna look bad because we've already got a 2 o'clock patient in the back right here, And so like, bam, she got one, and like it'll get in the mail within the hour, and we've got it figured out, and we've got it ready to go. And so like things like that, we're into preventative medicine, right? That's the same thing. So to answer your question, if you get a 1-star review, lean into it and just say like, hey, sorry you had a bad experience. We really try to do A, B, C, and D. And you just like lay out your mission statement and make it a big positive thing. And it works out quite well. I had this whole conversation with the dentist who is the highest rated dental office in the nation, because I was like, what do you do? How does this work? And he's like, I love 1-star reviews. He doesn't, but he does. Because I can say, I can pull the narrative back to us.
The only thing I was going to add is that DPC will attract a certain population of patients that are kind of disenfranchised, upset with the healthcare system. And some of those people legitimately have reason to be, and others are just kind of people that cannot be pleased no matter what you do. So I would say you have to be prepared to get some bad reviews as your practice grows. We have one, like Andrew was saying, but I don't know how you avoid. I mean, you'll always have people that personality-wise you just can't make them happy.
My question is, when you're saying you're going to go and call on these different employers, are you making appointments before you go? Do you cold call? Are you asking to speak with the office manager? Are you bringing like goodies? Do you have to like put in your budget like little merchy stuff to drop off and leave there?
Yeah, it's difficult. In the beginning, I went to Chamber of Commerce meetings. I thought that would be a great place. You connect with these business owners and stuff. It's really hard. You have to get in front of the decision makers. If it's a small business, I guess you just could walk in places, and I have done that before. I find that in most cases, the most successful places is they find you, or the broker finds you, which again, sometimes takes a few years for that to happen. But it is really hard, especially if you are calling on a business and they have no idea what DPC is and they're not a current patient. So that's the other thing. If you can get patients who own businesses and even look through your patients and see if any of those patients employ people, that's kind of a good place to start too.
Andrew, I'm the GA who also does OMT. How do you price your OMT at?
So how do we price the OMT? So I have it included in the cost. It doesn't cost any more for my patients. It's great for growing a practice. You do have to draw a line a little bit and be like, hey, I'm not a chiropractor. I'm not going to see you 3 times a week for the next 12 weeks. I don't have that in my budget to do that. When I began, I also had like a fee-for-service type OMT offering. So if people just wanted to walk in off the street and do that, and I did that with a handful of people, you do have to check with your insurance to make sure your malpractice, to make sure in your state that you can do that within the exact type of policy that you have. But I just do it, you come in, we take care of you, period, whether that's OMT or me prescribing medicine or whatever. And that has worked very well. I've seen a lot of different options for that, and some practices, it's better. Like if they're worried about high utilizers, then you just do a really cheap add-on cost, like $5 or $10, like, hey, I'll see you, but if you want to do this, it's just like $5 or $10. And then you post on your website some like kind of ridiculous high number. You're like, yes, it's going to be $150 if you come in off the street, but for my members, it's $7.50, and things like that. So it kind of limits how many people are coming in and how frequently they're coming in.
I have a quick question. If you can remember, more or less, how was your business pace when you started and when you decided to add another MD? Like how was your space? And basically how many patients do you have when you decided to start with another MD? So I'm just trying to figure it out this way.
Yeah, I think I was, I don't know, somewhere around 250 to 300 patients when I started looking, because I didn't know how long it would take to find somebody, and maybe it took me like 6 months or so. So around that time, you want to allow yourself enough time to find someone, because it can take a long time for the first one especially.
And what about your space? Like my current space is 1,200, and I feel that I'm just trapped. I don't know if it's me, but suddenly I feel like there's 2 people coming and suddenly something urgent. It's like, well, I'm going to replace this patient, So I feel that I'm running out of space because I have 2 rooms, but I don't know if it's just me, I just want to be sure that I'm taking the right decision, and maybe I just need to have a little bit more space, and I to, grow a little bit and then add someone else to the practice. I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah, for me, and I'll let Andrew answer, but our first clinic was like 1,500 square feet and it had 2 exam rooms. And it was not a space decision to add a second clinic. It was a strategic decision just to have more clinics. So we took on, again, additional expense when we didn't technically need to, again, which goes against the DPC theory of keep your overhead low. But yeah, I would say that, 1,200, if you got 2 exam rooms, that should technically be enough for 2 docs, even you're operating out of, so we try to make it so that we each have a room and all of our appointments are an hour long.
Same thing. You're pushing the limits of what you can fit. If you get another doc in 1,200 square feet, that's really tight. For me, it was. I think we had, how big was our first office? Was it 14? I think it was like 14 and change, and our second doc was pretty tight with where, I had all the room I wanted because I created the office, and then she showed up, and I was like, oh, how about that really big closet, and so, you're kind of pushing the limits there.
Yeah, my question is just, would you just offer like the office right next to me? Like I just need to just stir up, the wall, and we can expand. I'm not sure if I have 220 patients right now, but I'm not sure if that's the right decision at this point. I'm not paying I'm paying myself like $1,000. I go back to the student loan. I have debts, so I'm not sure if this is the right moment to do it. I'm just lost in that.
Sometimes I would look at it in the context of, if I take on this additional expense, how many more patients do I need to pay to get this? So if you're averaging $60 a month or $70 a month, and it's like, if I'm taking on an additional $2,000 a month for this larger space, how many more patients, how long will it take me to get the number of patients I need to get to pay for that? Sort of.
All right, we'll need to end it here. You're welcome to come up and talk to Dr. Hemkes and Dr. Anderson.